Good afternoon. I'm David Croft, your workshop host. I'm here to introduce you to Jeff Bowman, the co-founder and CEO of the Ames Institute. This workshop is titled Scaling Beyond the Founder, Building a Business that Runs and Scales Without Depending on You. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
It's funny, I walked up here talking as if I still had the lavalier mic on from earlier. Welcome everybody. Thank you for giving me 45 minutes of your time. My goal is to make it as valuable as possible in the time that we have for each and every one of you. Quick question, quick poll. I move around a lot, so I'm gonna have to keep moving back to the podium here. You probably noticed that about me. Quick question, just do me a favor. I can kind of see the badges, but raise your hand if you're an aspiring business owner and a student or aspiring business owner. Okay, we got a few. Current business owners, several. Investors, got a few of those. And support. So you a couple of people in the room. I love how there's a couple hands for multiple things, which is really cool because, yeah, I mean, if you were to ask me, I could probably do the same thing. Just wanted to get a sense for who's in the audience and how do I make sure that I serve each and every one of you in this session in terms of what I'm going to cover. And so if you're an aspiring owner, one of the things you're probably thinking about is how do I move beyond the founder when I acquire this business. If you're a current business owner, you might be thinking about how do I move into that place, like the slide says, where I can really have a company that runs, improves, and scales whether I'm in the room or not. And if you're an investor, you're thinking about maybe both of those things for the companies that you're currently investing in or thinking about investing in the future. And so good news is for everybody here, there'll be elements that are designed just for you. And so before I dig in here, I got to remember to click the buttons here. Let's just talk about where you're at and what you might be looking for. And so I try to think of the outcomes that each of the stakeholders in this room would be thinking about. And so if you're an aspiring business owner, one of the things I'm going to talk about is credibility, but not necessarily credibility in that your credibility to actually complete a search. What I'm talking about is the credibility to demonstrate that you can lead a team and grow a company to results. So that's what I mean in terms of credibility there. If you're an existing owner, there's probably a couple different things that you're looking for, specific outcomes. How do I increase the value of the company? Or how do I create more freedom for myself? Maybe that's what you designed the business to create and you're finding yourself not in that situation. Or maybe you're just in the phase of your life, like Brian talked about, what did he say? Silver tsunami, where you're looking to create some more of that freedom. It's that time in your journey. And if you're an investor, you're looking for the comfort in knowing that a potential person you're going to back has the confidence to run and scale a business, or the business that maybe you're investing in or supporting in terms of an acquisition process has some of those key fundamentals as well. So here's my plan for what I was going to cover today in this workshop, and I promise there's going to be an interactive element to this at the end, which you probably guessed with me. First, I'm going to talk about some of the realities that we often find ourselves in when we're either faced with or running an organization related to the regular operations or trying to improve it or even trying to grow or scale it. Then I'll talk about what the common solutions are, like what are the common things that most business owners do when they find themselves in any one of those realities. I'll unpack some of the mental models or maybe beliefs that we have that hold us back from really moving beyond that founder stage. And I'll share one of the secrets. I don't want to claim it to be the secret, but one of the secrets that we've found in working with the companies that we do to unlocking what's possible with your teams in your companies. Finally, I'll talk about 3 shifts you can make and give you that experience that I was talking about. So let's dive in here into the realities that we often find ourselves. So if you're an aspiring business owner, again, you're wanting to show investors that you're credible, to demonstrate that you can lead, to have the confidence knowing that when you go into this, you can actually deliver those results. You can make a business work, that you have these lives that depend on you, that you're not going to lose a ton of sleep over that. that you can deliver results. And so going into that, oftentimes here's what we think business growth is going to look like, right? This is what we think going in, but in reality, and you all know this, this is more of what it typically looks like, right? It's messy, right? We try things, some things work, some things don't. We take a step forward, we take 3 steps back. The more we grow, and as we're moving up that progression, the more we add complexity. And the more we add complexity, the more difficult it becomes to generate more growth. So we search out. We get to this point and we start searching out others who have the answers to make our growth pack look more like the first, right? People have done this, so let's find out what they've done. Reality number 2. So eventually, most businesses, I would say, hit a wall. And maybe it's not one wall. Maybe it's one wall and then the next and then the next. But that's been my experience anyway, where, in one case, growth adds a ton of complexity to your business. And so you're finding yourself working harder and harder. And no matter how hard you work, nothing seems to change. It just seems like you get more stressed and more worn out by the business. Or maybe you're in a period where maybe you've just acquired a business or you're running a business, and no matter what you do, you can't seem to grow that business at all. Right? You'll struggle at different points in your journey. And so depending on where you're at, inevitably each and every one of us, myself included, hit some kind of wall. Reality number 3. Talked about this with that silver tsunami idea. Eventually, you're going to get to a point as a business owner where you want to thinking in terms of what's my exit strategy, right? You finally are at a point where you want to get that freedom that you designed the business to create in the first place. And as you think about exiting, you start realizing that the business is still really dependent on you, right? And even if you can sell, which everybody in this room knows, it's really difficult to sell a business. If you do go through the process, you're able to sell. In a lot of cases, you're going to be tied to the business after the sale because it's so dependent on you. Or, worst case scenario, you need to exit and the value that you think your business worth is significantly devalued when it comes time for the sale itself. Right? I'm going to talk about one of those examples in a little bit. So no matter which of those realities or other realities that you may be faced with, what most people do when they come to one of those is they go in search of a playbook. They go in search of a management system, right? Something predictable, something proven, something easy to follow, right? There has to be a proven method out there, a system that's going to outline exactly what a business owner should do. And the good news is there's several of those. Right? And when you're doing that, when you're in search of that playbook, that's humility in action. That's recognizing that someone else, as I said before, already has the answers to the chaos that you're experiencing, right? When you're staring at the complexities of growing a business, the missed handoffs, the unclear priorities, the endless fires, the playbook itself that you're in search for feels like safety to you, right? So you start searching for a simple framework that'll give you that safety, something that says just follow these steps and everything's going to run smoothly. And so what happens? What do we typically find when we do that? So there's lots of management systems out there. There's EOS, there's the 4 disciplines of execution, there's scaling up. I could go on and on. There's a balanced scorecard, lots of operating systems on there for what you need to do to run your business. Right? In each and every one of those is promising the same thing. It's structure, it's clarity, it's results. And as you dig in, you start to notice some things, right? In each of those management systems that are out there, they all share remarkable similarities. When multiple systems, maybe each one of those you're looking at, tell you the same thing, they all have those similarities, it confirms that safety for you, that you're on the right path. Right? It feels like that proof that you've been looking for, that these are the right ways to run a business. What I need is a management system. And if other people have had success using it, heck, that's even better. Right? Having management disciplines in place is important. Structure, the words that you always hear, accountability, rhythm, planning, those things are super important. We'd all agree on that. but I think it's important to dig a little bit deeper. Why is it that when companies lean into management systems, some companies thrive, but many others don't? I think that's really important to unpack. And so I want to pose a question to all of you. Excuse me. What would you say if you looked at the most successful business owners, the most successful CEOs, do you think they've focused more on having the right system or consistently following the system that they had? You think it's A or B? Having the right system or consistently following the one that they pick? If you think it's A, raise your hand. Okay, a couple hands. B, everybody. Consistently following the right one. Here's the interesting thing. In the companies that we've studied firsthand, the companies that we've worked with, the companies that are in our portfolio, the hundreds of companies that we've supported, is that what most business leaders, most successful business leaders focus on and recognize is that what system they follow or how consistently they follow it matters less than how they go about implementing it. And so it's neither and both at the same time, right? So I'm not going to go through all this data on the slide. I think there's just one really important point here to emphasize, right? And I think it supports what most business owners that thrive do is they focus on how they're implementing it more so than having the right system or consistently following it. Because what McKinsey identified is that nearly 70% of change initiatives fail, right? And really, when you think about implementing a management system, that's a change initiative. It's a big change initiative, right? And if 70% of the time you go to do that, it's going to fail. Why is that? And here's what they found. It's not because the system or the plan's wrong, or which one you picked or how consistently you follow it. It's because of how it was implemented. Really, really important to surface. So at the end of the day, we could say that it's less about the system itself and more about how people feel inside of it. Right? Less about the system itself, more about how people feel inside of it. I was up here last year. Anybody who saw the workshop that I did, we talked about companies that use EOS. EOS has a great system. It has great disciplines, right? But what you really find when you unpack it for those companies that thrive using it is they'll use the term it's EOS plus plus plus. It's the plus 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 that they figured out in how they go about implementing that actually makes it work. Okay, so let's dig deeper. If we look at where we're at in today's times, right? The world's changed dramatically. The world's changed dramatically in the last 5 years. It's changed in the last year alone. It's changed in the last 10. It's definitely changed in the last 100. And here's the truth. Most of the branded systems that are out there today, 4 disciplines of execution, EOS, scaling up, balanced scorecard, the things they identify for what you need to do are spot on, right? But how you go about doing it, they haven't really evolved. And if you look at back the origin of all of those systems, which are simplified versions of what was prevalent over 100 years ago today, they come from the Rockefeller habits, right? They come from the principles of scientific management. And so what we really need is a modern approach to how we go about doing it. We talk about this at Ames where we have the same disciplines, the same things that you'd focus on, but it's the practices, it's the container we can create, it's the focus that we put on the conversations that we're having, it's the questions that we ask that really matter, right? If everything was built on the Rockefeller habits, then I think we could say that those simplified brand management systems that are out there are really principles of the industrial age. Right? Where control was the path to efficiency. And management was really focused on managing people. Back then, I think that made sense. Right? In a factory, consistency was king. I think that was true then. I work with clients in the manufacturing space today. they're changing dramatically, right? With automation and AI and different things that are happening, even in a manufacturing setting, some of these things today, I don't think you could say is true. But in a factory back then, consistency was king. You didn't need creativity or ownership. You needed output, right? But here's the problem with that. We don't live in a world like that anymore today. We're not managing factories in the industrial area. We're leading living human systems. I was talking to one of our coaches inside Ames, and we were coming back from a client engagement just a couple of weeks ago. And the coach was saying to me, like, Jeff, so many people things that we're working through with this business owner. Well, I wish we just had a simple checklist. And I said, isn't that at the core of what we're talking about with Ames, though? Right? If there's a simple checklist to how we dealt with living human systems, certainly it would have been created by this point today. And really, in the magic of our work and what we do with clients is how do we pull the best out of that living human system, right? Living human systems don't respond to command and control. I have three teenage daughters. That's a living human system. They don't respond to command and control. Right? We've really moved from the industrial age to the information age now to, I think, what they're calling the cognitive age, where today's businesses have to run on creativity, connection, and collaboration, powered by people that are solving complex problems together. Right? The systems we're turning to were designed for that time 100 years ago, right? When management did mean control, when leadership meant we're the ones with all the answers. I could tell you a deep, long story about how I believed that illusion for far too long, right? And in my case was humbled. And when I made that realization, and we all have different points when you come to that realization, when I realized I didn't need to be the one that had all the answers, amazing things started to happen. So what really happens when we apply industrial age logic to an information or cognitive age business? What you get is you get order without energy. You get structure, I would say, without soul. And you get meetings without meaning. Meetings without meaning, not meeting, right? You get a business that looks organized but starts to feel a little bit lifeless. You get, and this is a term we talk a lot about with our clients, you get compliance that's masked as this form of buy-in, but it's not commitment that shows up in ownership of action and results. So when we talk about how times have changed, I was reminded of this recently in my own home, right? And I'll tell you a quick story about my oldest, who's a 14-year-old girl. So she had a boyfriend. And apparently, what I didn't know is that her and her boyfriend had broken up a couple weeks before. Just making sure I got the right screen up there. So I didn't find out about this until over a week later. And so when I went to her, I said, hey, how come I'm not finding out about it now? And she said, well, what do you mean? Well, apparently I missed a Snapchat story where she announced that she had broken up with her boyfriend. Not only that, the Snapchat story said, waste of time. So apparently, I've come to learn that how teenagers communicate at the end of a relationship today is a disappearing message with the words waste of time on this ghost type application where messages self-destruct, right? And as I was thinking about that, it really hit me. That's kind of how the world's working today, right? You blink and you've missed an entire story, both in business and life. That's the day and age we're working in. So what makes some business owners lean towards a different approach to how they go about implementing the systems in today's modern era? One of the questions that we consistently ask the business owners that we work with is this, is when did you realize that you needed a different approach? When did you come to that realization? Because I think that's important. What was your biggest aha moment? We've answered that question for each of us in the Ames Institute ourselves as well. And when you boil down the common themes across their answers, we're starting to group those into what we call the big mental traps, right? The things that we or outdated beliefs, if you want to call it that people fall into. And I was one of those, as I mentioned earlier, that fell into these same beliefs. Right? And so I want to unpack one of those right now. It's the one at the top, which is the illusion of simplicity. Right? I'm going to talk about what it is, why we buy into it, and then the paradox it creates. Right? So what is the illusion of simplicity is when someone hands you that management system, that simple playbook, right? With the neat little steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. It feels like relief. It's like, oh, finally got the answers to how I need to run my business. Right? It's almost like it's a promise to you that if you just install the system, that your business is now going to suddenly hum like a machine. Feels good, it feels logical, it feels safe, like I talked about earlier. It's clarity in the form of these checklists that we just need to follow. You don't have to wrestle the nuances of human behavior or motivation. You just follow the steps, decide, communicate, maybe 7 times in some cases, and repeat that cycle. We believe it's clean, we believe it's predictable, and to someone facing a business with added complexity, that gives us comfort. Right? But actually, that's why it's so dangerous, is the comfort we feel. Because the simple solutions that are out there let you believe that if you can document it, if you can measure it, and you can monitor it, then you can manage it. And for a little while, it works. The meetings feel organized, scorecards start to feel tidy, everyone nods, right? People are using the same language. But then slowly, you start to feel something change. The business looks structured with this new management system, but things start to feel heavier again. The system that was supposed to simplify things starts to make things seem more complicated again. Right? And so the paradox is the very thing you were looking for, the very thing you turn to for that simplicity, is the thing that quietly makes your world more complex. You spend more time managing that system than you're actually spending managing the business. You measure everything, you start to trust almost nothing. You add meetings to keep the process alive until the process actually becomes the point. How well are we following the process? Right? People may comply, but they don't really commit. Right? And this company that you once had when it was smaller, that moved fast and free, starts to move in slower motion again, weighed down by really good intentions from you as the leader or business owner. So this is the illusion of simplicity that we're searching. It promises clarity, but it breeds complexity. It promises freedom, but actually creates dependency, more dependency on you as an owner to make sure that people are following it. And it promises certainty, which I think it delivers on, but it can stifle creativity. And so why does this happen? Why does this system that's supposed to miraculously simplify things, why does it create this paradox? Because, as I said before, mechanical systems, which is really, if you think about them, they were designed in the industrial area for a mechanical environment. Mechanical systems weren't designed for living human organizations. They were built for predictable environments. Factories, assembly lines, repeatable tasks. And I think we all agree, business today isn't mechanical, it's relational. It's not about control, it's about connection. It's not about enforcing steps, it's about enabling contribution from everywhere. Not about managing people, it's about managing conversations. Conversations that connect us. So when you treat a living system like a machine, you might, if you're lucky, get some efficiency, but I can almost guarantee you're going to lose energy. And when energy disappears, that's when growth stalls. So that's why, as a leader, you feel stuck inside this very system that was supposed to set you free. Now, those that have success, they start to figure out there's a different way. There's a different how. There's modern ways that you can bring this in. Some might even spend additional money on culture type work for how you're implementing the disciplines themselves. Right? Here's the reality. Simplicity, the simplicity that we're craving, it doesn't come from simple logical steps. Right? It's not about better steps that you're following. It's about having better conversations. Conversations that I would say build clarity, conversations that build trust, conversations that build commitment, conversations that don't just connect people on paper, they connect people in purpose. That's the kind of simplicity that I'm going to talk about with AIMS. That's the kind of simplicity that AIMS helps leaders create. Not mechanical simplicity that flattens a business, but human simplicity in the conversations that we have that actually bring a business to life. So here's the thing. You, me, we didn't invent these beliefs that I was talking about, right? We inherited them, but they were just built for a different time. So it's not our fault, right? What holds true, what we need to do, how needs to change. And it's actually a lot easier than you think. So let me go through a couple case studies here to illustrate maybe two of the other illusions that I had on that slide earlier. So here's case study number one. Case study number one is a client we started working with a few years ago. And when the client came to us, there's a few hands in here of aspiring owners. Right? And this is a person who was an aspiring owner working inside of an organization, right? That organization had just been acquired and this person was interested in entrepreneurship, becoming credible. And so what they noticed was that they were stalled. They were in the weeds. They weren't having meetings. They had no structure. They didn't have systems. They tried to implement a system and they were faced with a whole bunch of resistance, right? The original founder in this case was actually afraid to step out of the business because the founder was worried that everything was going to fall apart. So they sold the business, but was still involved, right? The COO saw this need for discipline, saw this need for a management system, and thought, what if I could have a planning session where we brought all the voices in from the company? I think that's what we need to do. And so they reached out to us and say, how do we even do that? And here's what's really interesting, I think, about this story. We came in and we supported them. We used something called the SOAR framework, which is critical in one of our methodologies with AIMS. But this is what she said after bringing us in and after she saw what was happening with the team. Is what she realized, and this is the hero illusion, right? We believe we need to have the answers. That's what makes us the hero. We believe, how many times do you go in an organization and say, what are your greatest strengths? I'm a problem solver, right? Having all the answers. That's the old belief that we have, right? And so what she realized in this case was that maybe she didn't have to be the hero with the answers. Instead, she just needed to be the hero that created the space for the right questions to come out. Now, here's what's really important, I think, with this message is she recognized that every voice needed to be in the conversation, and that's why she brought us in. Because we had some miraculous way of helping them with different management disciplines. It was the same, but she wanted all voices in that conversation. Now, when you look at the success, and I'll talk about some of that success in just a minute, when you look at the success, who do you think they attribute that success to? It's not to the AIMS Institute. It's to her for creating that space. We believe we have to be the one. You don't have to be the one. You bring the resources in that help you create the container with the right focus and the right questions, and beautiful things happen. Here's another example, case study number two, and I alluded to this earlier, when value depends on one person. So we had someone approach us, a really great business, but that was entirely founder dependent. And the business owner approached me and said, can I pick your brain on something? And I said, sure. I have this offer for my business. I'm thinking about selling. So we asked a bunch of questions in the spirit of the work that I do. Probably asked too many questions, but I was really curious. And so what I understood was the founder was working 70 hours a week. And his two kids at home and his wife were like, we just want dad back. That was his driving force for selling the business because he's working too much. And so when he's looking at selling, he said, my gut's telling me that this offer that I've got is way undervalued. Right? They said, well, this is a recovering CPM. Send me the financial details, send me the offer, and we'll go through it. So I went through it, and it turns out it was over 40% devalued. Why? For one single reason. Really good business on paper, really profitable, really great revenue, really good customer segmentation. But it was entirely dependent on him. 40%. Right? I'll show you the number in a second here. That original offer came at $8 million. We figured it out that it was worth 13. In the meantime, since we've been working with, they got another offer for 13. So it validated what those numbers were, right? Think about that just in terms of the context, though. You have a business that's solely reliant on the founder. I'm not going to share their profitability numbers. Extremely profitable, right? Devalued by 40%. Huge, huge, right? So what he decided to do is not to sell and bring us in. And so working with them, right, the goal was to create a business that didn't depend on him by implementing aims and unlocking the potential of the team, right? And so in just 6 months of working with them, they unlocked some really significant, what we call quick wins, but they're big priorities that required very little effort, but had a huge return. They implemented those 5 things. They created shared purpose around what growth actually looked like for that company. And in the first year alone, so when they project out to next year, they'll have 150% growth over the current year. Think about what that means from a valuation perspective now. Most importantly, the picture on that screen, he's having vacations with his family again, right? He's taking intentional time away from the business. He's not working 70 hours, right? The team is starting to come to life. Those first 2 case studies are the first 2 numbers on the board. The first one, I talked about the results, right? Which everybody credits the results to her, not to Ames, right? Is their revenue went from 3 million to 12 million in just 2 years in an industry that was unheard of at the time. The second one, valuation, I told you the numbers already, from 8 to 13 million. Here's another company that went from 43% engagement 6 months later to 82% just by moving from, and I won't say the name of the management system they were using, from following one of those traditional branded management systems to using Ames 6 months later, 82%. That company went on to sell, by the way. And the fourth, incremental revenue with one company we worked with of $5 million in a less than a 6-month period. Right? So when you unlock the capacity that's available to you in your business, you make the impossible not just possible, but probable. So I promised you 3 things. I promised you that we'd give you some ways of doing this. So here's the 3 shifts really that you need to make, right? The first shift is having the realizations you do around those illusions. The first shift you need to understand is you have to move from the select few people in the management conversations you're having to the diverse many. And when I say that, I mean the diverse many with the right people in the room. It doesn't mean just blanketly inviting anybody in the room. Trust me, we've tried that. That doesn't work. Right? You want to move from relying on the select few to have all those answers to having the diverse right many in the management conversations that you're having. People that are front of line in terms of what's actually happening with your customers and your business. How do you do that? You move that way by creating a container where you ask questions instead of giving answers. Where you ask generative questions around the things that you want, not questions around the things that you don't. And you move from an environment where you're controlling people, what I call compliance, to building a cadence where people make and meet commitments every single week. Those are the shifts that you need to make. Now, if you would have told me that 15 years ago, I would have said, Jeff, you're nuts. How do you do that without it turning into chaos? You do it with a proven methodology, with proven practices. I don't need to go through that chart. I want to give you an experience right now, just looking at the time. We're going to do this quickly, right? And I'm going to do this individually. Normally I do it in bigger groups, but I want you just to experience what Ames feels like. All right, what we would do with a typical client. I'm going to give you 2 examples, the traditional method. So here's my question. Grab your notebook, grab a pen. I want you to write down, take 60 seconds right now. What red flags do you think are present when a business is too reliant on the owner? What are the red flags that you'd see if you were looking at a business and it was too reliant on the owner? Just write down as many things as you can think of a business that is too reliant on owner. What red flags would you see? All right, now we're going to try to do this really quick. I want you to turn to a neighbor, but literally I want you to take 60 seconds to share what you wrote down. 60 seconds. What are the red flags you see? And then I'll get you back up here. 60 seconds. Share with your neighbor. All right. If I can have your attention back up here. Just raise your hand. I'd love to hear a few of the things that emerged in your conversation. What red flags do you see when you have a business that's too reliant on an owner? Yep.
Risk of failure, knowledge transfer, and hard to manage or change.
Hard to manage or change, risk, high risk. Yep, 100%. Others? Yep.
Lack of employee engagement and growth.
Lack of employee engagement, lack of growth. Yep. Others? Back?
Yeah, if there's like a bottleneck in decision making or bills getting paid, that probably might mean that a whole bunch of stuff's ending up on the owner's desk and they just can't get through it.
Yep. Yep. Bottlenecks for sure.
Too much involved in just execution than strategic decision making.
Yeah, you're just trying to get things done. You're not taking a moment to step back and focus on the business. All of those. Another one?
Probably a micromanager.
Micromanager, 100%.
Clients are probably going to run when he dies. And if he gets sick, he could probably bankrupt the company.
Yep. Yeah, and I've seen that in many cases, right? Where something unfortunate happens to an owner and you're just dissolving of a company because it can't keep going. All of those things are red flags, right? Now let's think about the impacts of those, right? What's the impact when you have a business that's too reliant on an owner, right? We talked about the things that we'll see, but ultimately, I said this before, the business is going to be undervalued. Revenue, you're going to miss revenue targets, and each of those revenue targets you miss is going to compound. Engagement falls, we heard that one. Owners burn out, right? They could have health issues because they're the person that everything depends on. Opportunities missed, project stalls, customers wait. Usually profits start dwindling, right? Cash starts drying up. Those things all become really apparent for a business. Just thinking about that feels heavy, right? All right, let's do the second part of this. New question. What strategies do you think or have worked best for you when you've acquired a business that's too reliant on the founder? So if you were going into a situation or buying a company and it was too reliant on the founder, what are some things that you think would work or have worked for you to help move past the founder? Take another 60 seconds. Write down any ideas. No such thing as a bad idea. What are some strategies that you think or have worked best for you acquiring a company that's too reliant on the owner? This is where I need Mark to put some journaling music up. All right, same thing. Turn to a different neighbor, share what strategies you wrote down really quickly, 60 seconds, and then we'll get a few up to the front of the room. All right, if I can have your attention again up here. It's harder to interrupt that energy. All right, same thing. Love to hear from 2, 3, maybe 4 people. What strategies did you identify in your conversation? What strategies might work? Yep.
Came in as an employee and with a idea that you'd be taking the company over from the owner. Maybe we want to teach you along the way. Either one of you can back out. That kind of deal. It doesn't seem right.
Love that. Love that. You already have some of that institutional knowledge and the person's more willing to do it. Beautiful. Other strategies? We'll go second row, first row, fifth row.
All right. So setting up the KPIs and sharing how to interpret those KPIs and how they work if those KPIs shift, and giving that dedication to the employees and how they work and how to improve those.
Awesome. Implementing some of the disciplines with some discussion around why they're important. Love it. Yep. Up here.
Provide growth opportunities and responsibilities that the founder was not giving employees.
Beautiful. Love it. Get more people involved, give them opportunities, allow them to volunteer. Yep.
Usually create some mechanism for feedback initially, like a survey or some way just to start pulling voices in.
Get the voices to tell us what the opportunities are. Beautiful. Any others? One in the back, 2 in the back. Sean, and then the individual behind you.
So creating a culture of empowerment, which is kind of important that you've got like a safe space for non-critical decisions. The owners made all the decisions. People may be anxious about making those. Obviously, don't want them to make decisions that's going to take the business over a cliff. But how do you push some of those decisions to their area of responsibility?
Yeah, using a framework, giving people a way to make decisions without having to go to the owner every time. One more right behind there. Yep.
Yeah, this only works if you're like part of the ownership of the business and also you're, kind of at the point where you tried everything else and it's already failed. But something that we tried internally was kind of like a shock therapy where we literally told my dad, you have to take a day off. And he took the day off and predictably a bunch of things went wrong that no one knew how to deal with. And that kind of convinced him to at least take a look at, creating some, redundancies and, fallbacks and giving the employees a little more authority to do what they needed to do versus just, entirely relying on him because before that point he wasn't aware that it was an issue.
Love it. Love it. Forcing someone to take it out. One more? Can I come back to your question in just a little bit? I promise I will. Okay. So what's really fascinating, right, is think about what just happened. I could have stood up here for 45 minutes and tried to come up with all of those different things that you just identified for strategies for how to move beyond a founder in literally 2 minutes. Look at all the ideas that you just came up with. That's what AIMS is, right? It's with the right focus, with the right question, and creating the right environment, pulling the knowledge and wisdom out of the team. Now, how much more likely are you to implement one of those strategies you just talked about versus any of the stuff that I talked about? Probably more likely, because you had a hand in identifying what they were. One other quick thing. How did the first conversation feel versus the second conversation? I noticed something up here, but how did it feel? What did the first conversation feel like? Anyone? Did it feel heavy? Say that again.
Negative.
Negative, yeah.
Focus on the negative part of like that person or
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, you're looking at, oh, this person's wrong. Look at the things that are broken, right? It drains the energy from you. How did the second conversation feel? The opposite, uplifting, right? It's not just about moving from answers to questions. It's about asking the right questions with the right people in the room, right? That's AIMS. That's what you've just experienced, right? Same room, same people, totally different outputs from those 2 different conversations. What we do as business owners, as leaders, is we default to the first with only a select few people in the room. That's what we default to because it's easier and it feels more comfortable. What we want to do is have more voices and ask more of those types of questions. We talked about this. It came from you, right? First one felt heavy. The second one felt light. The first one was problem focused. The second one was possibility focused. And so really you have a choice. And I'm going to share this with you quickly. I want to open it up to questions. And the first one right back here. We're at a point, I talked about hitting a wall in full transparency. We're at a wall. Right? We only have 3 spots left for clients. If you're interested, before you go into your next planning session, A lot of people are going into planning sessions for the fall, going into 2026. Reach out, jump on a call with us, have a discovery call. We'll identify the things, the opportunities that are available to you. No commitment either way. What we're really trying to do is help you unlock what's possible and make that probable in your company. And unlike other systems where it might take a year or 2 years, we're trying to do that within the next 6 months to give you the tools that you can do it on your own in a very short period of time, right? There's, next slide, you can on the left, and I think I've got to upload the one on the right. You're going to get that through ETA anyway. If you want to book a call, you can just scan that. That'll take you to our website. All right, I want to go back in the middle here. Question you had for us. And do we have a microphone? I'll run it over.
Okay. So I did enjoy these two critical questions, and maybe this is something I've been marinating all year when you brought up these questions. I felt kind of called out in my frustrations, but we hit a nail on the head with something where we talked about skills or trades based business, right? So owner, something like, it might be a small nursing practice, might be accounting firm, might be plumbing, HVAC, etc., where you have it dependent on the owner, right? And it's not that the owner is controlling or doesn't want to release things. It's just that quite literally the talent out there, it's very hard to find talent that wants to do independent work. So I'm candidly asking, like, how do you realistically, in theory, everything that you just said sounds great, right? In terms of empowering people to do stuff. And I've tried all that in my business. I'm a CPA firm owner. I have a lot of clients in these type of businesses too as well. So we're always venting to each other about these frustrations. So realistically then, how do you empower people, right? In theory, everything you said sounds great. How do you empower people to want to be able to do that kind of stuff, right? Outside of monetary things.
Yeah, so can I ask you a quick clarifying question back? When you talked about like I think you said plumbing example, how many people would do in that company?
And it could be any. I'm just talking about, okay, so I'm a CPA firm owner. I have a lot of clients in the construction industry, right? So I'm talking about people from all different types of range of businesses, right? But I guess maybe what's the context of the question?
Well, so I just trying to understand the size of the company you're working with to make sure I hear the right answer.
Maybe anywhere from 5 or 50 or 100 folks or something like that in these skills, trades and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And especially in construction, they're always, complaining about it's just so hard to find labor. And labor that wants to commit and be consistent and think about doing the job. And, and I find
I'm going to make sure I follow my own advice and come back to the microphone to answer. Okay. Thank you. I have a bit of a hearing loss. That's why I have to come closer. So here's a couple of things that I'll share with you. When you have a smaller size company, it's really hard to do what we just did in this room. But the principles and practices of how you have conversations still remains. And so we have different methodologies for how we help leaders conduct those conversations in a way that pull out the best in the people on their team. So that's the answer when you have a smaller type organization. Here's the thing. It goes back and it supports what I was saying before. These living human systems is what we're working with today, and the complexities you're talking about make it so much more important that the management system you lean into at least helps you work through and navigate those types of complexities. Most of the companies that we work with, I say most, we have companies that are 30,000 people, but most of the ones that we work with are 15, 20, or 50 or 70 people, right? And everything you're describing hits home for me. And so what we really focus on in the beginning phases is the people aspect, but we do it through the lens of what are the practices we can embody and the tools we can use that bring AIMS types of thinking into those conversations that we're having. If I really encourage you to think about this is, what do we do as leaders 90% of the time? We have conversations. And so why not bring the right questions, the right focus, the right frame, and create the right environment where you have an opportunity to pull the best out of people? I don't know if that answered your question, but I guess I'm affirming the challenges you face are real. And I think for that reason, even more so, lean into something that has that human element to the management system design. Does that help? Okay. And you have a CPA firm. Let's connect. Let's talk. I'm a recovering CPA, so there you go. Any other questions? I know the doors are open. We're on break.
Is this applicable to somebody who owners kind of not removed entirely, but just doesn't want to show up? That you have like a second in command that's just running the whole show?
100%. 100%. Yep. Yep. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jeff. Big round of applause for Jeff. So to show our appreciation for your support, we've made a donation on your behalf to Owners in Honor. Thanks so much for presenting. So folks, next up for you is a 20-minute break, so grab a snack, meet somebody new. After the break, the next set of workshops start at 2:55. See page 11 in your workbook for an overview of the next set of workshops. Workshop details start on page 20. In this room, you'll hear about the latest trends in M&A and how to apply them to your due diligence. Thanks, everyone, for attending.